We thought we were building the fleet that would carry Egypt's power west and make Rome respect the sea again. I was a young shipyard worker in Alexandria, where Cleopatra's commands reached us as timber, bronze, rope, and song. No one in our yard believed Egypt was fading. We believed Alexandria still stood among the great cities of the sea. Alexandria was grain, gold, ships, libraries, markets, temples, languages, and white stone shining above blue Mediterranean harbor water. At sunrise, the Pharos lifted its light over warehouses, royal slips, merchant masts, and galleys waiting for command. To me, the harbor looked eternal, as if the sea itself had chosen Alexandria for greatness. My hands knew only small duties, smoothing ribs, pulling rope, brushing pitch. Yet those duties served a queen. Cleopatra was not a distant legend to us. She was the ruler whose will moved through every dock. Men spoke her name with pride because she had survived courts, brothers, Rome, and storms that would break others. If she ordered ships, we believed there was a reason. If she chose war, she had counted the cost. Beyond the quay, grain and taxes moved through ledgers while foreign merchants waited beneath the harbor colonnades. That was the Egypt I knew, not weak, not helpless, but disciplined, wealthy, and watched by rival powers. Rome was a name beyond the western water, powerful, yes, but still distant from our crowded morning harbor. A map in the naval office showed its coastlines, but maps could not measure what Alexandria carried inside. We saw strength in full warehouses, sharp tools, bronze rams, trained sailors, and hulls rising taller each week. When officers brought sealed orders at midday, the yard did not shrink from them. It straightened like a soldier. Every hammer answered faster, every rope tightened harder, and every worker believed the fleet would prove Egypt's place. That evening, I looked at the unfinished hull and felt certain Alexandria was preparing to answer Rome. Cleopatra did not command us with legend alone. She commanded through grain, gold, ships, and the discipline of Alexandria. To outsiders, Egypt was a prize. To us, it was a kingdom still able to answer any insult. Antony's officers arrived with Roman accents, but in our yard they waited for Egyptian timber and Egyptian grain. That made us proud, because even Rome's greatest men needed what Alexandria could still place upon the sea. The alliance looked grand from far away, yet beside the slips it became measurements, wages, pitch, and oars. Scribes counted hulls under oil lamps, while sailors tested oars and workers argued over the strongest rope available. Every list seemed to say the same thing. Egypt had resources, Egypt had ships, and Egypt still had time. Cleopatra's court sent orders, but the harbor answered them with confidence, as if wood itself trusted her judgment. We did not see a desperate queen, we saw a ruler turning wealth into movement before Rome could decide everything. Grain sacks filled storehouses, bronze came wrapped in cloth, and the galleys rose higher than any merchant mast. When the bronze ram touched the prow, men smiled because it looked like a promise made solid there. I remember thinking no western harbor could ignore a fleet built with hands like ours under Alexandria's sun. Rome had senators, speeches, and old victories, but Alexandria had bread, silver, sailors, and a queen still standing. That was how we spoke then, not with doubt, but with the pride of men serving a living power. The officers wanted speed, and we gave them speed, because loyalty in a shipyard is measured by finished hulls. At night, Alexandria glowed behind us, and I believe few cities on earth carried such a future forward. If Rome wished to test Egypt, we believed the sea would show Rome what our queen had prepared. By morning, the yard had become a war machine, and every hammer sounded like confidence answering the west. In the map room, Rome looked distant, but no longer mysterious. Its coastlines waited beyond the western water. Officers spoke of Octavian with care, yet most of us believed careful men could still be beaten at sea. He had speeches, letters, senators, and patience. Our queen had ships, grain, money, and the courage to answer him. Rumors said Rome mocked Antony, calling him lost to Eastern luxury, but we heard only insult in that. If they called our city dangerous, we took it as proof that Alexandria still mattered to powerful men. Every sealed message made the dockyard louder, because pride answers pressure by working harder than it had before. The papyrus route seemed simple to my young eyes, Alexandria here, Rome there, and the sea between them. But older commanders traced those waters slowly, measuring winds, harbors, supply lines, and places where fleets could wait. I did not see a trap then. I saw men planning the road to victory with serious faces. Actium was a small name on the map, but it began to gather weight beneath every burning lamp. Sailors repeated it as if the word itself could test their courage before the ships ever left harbor. Still, confidence filled the yard because each new hull made Rome feel less like a threat to us. We believed timber could answer speeches, bronze could answer rumors, and oars could answer the western wind itself. When the bronze rams caught sunrise, no worker near me doubted they would teach respect at sea again. Cleopatra's enemies were clever, but cleverness had not built the ships rising above our heads in Alexandria's yard. So we sharpened tools, checked ropes, and watched the map, certain our queen was moving before Rome expected. The western water looked wide, but wide water had always been Alexandria's road, not Alexandria's wall to us. By the time Actium filled every conversation, we believed the sea was preparing to carry Egypt forward westward. The morning the fleet sailed, Alexandria did not whisper. It dressed itself in sunlight, banners, and harbor noise. From every quay, people came to watch Egypt's answer to Rome gather at the mouth of the sea. War galleys filled the water, their oars lined like disciplined forests, waiting for the first command from the harbor drums. I saw ribs I had smoothed, knots I had tied, bronze edges I had polished beneath dawn for this hour. They no longer looked like work. They looked like a kingdom finding its body in wood and sail. Antony's men stood among Egyptian officers, and for once their different tongues seemed joined by the same horizon. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, Cleopatra had chosen the sea, and the sea now answered with movement before us. People cheered not because they were foolish, but because everything visible told us Egypt was ready for Rome. Grain had fed the crews, gold had paid the wages, and Alexandria had given the fleet its hands. The largest galley passed the quay like a floating wall, heavy with command, music, and expectation that morning. I believed no Western rival could look at such ships and think Egypt was already beaten before battle. To my young eyes, the harbor itself seemed to lean forward, pushing our strength into open water with pride. Yet beneath the cheering, the empty slipways began appearing, one after another, where power had just stood moments before. A boy asked when the fleet would return, and the older men laughed because the answer seemed obvious. Of course it would return. Great fleets returned with trophies, prisoners, stories, and proof that fear had been wrong. That was what we believed. While the last sail thinned against the brightness beyond Alexandria's breakwater that morning. When the harbor quieted, I did not hear warning. I heard only space waiting for victory to come home. We had watched Egypt sail west, and every heart on the quay believed it would return larger than before. Actium was not supposed to be the end. To us, it was the doorway through which victory would return. The fleet had left Alexandria like a promise, and promises are hard to doubt when you help build them. For days we worked and waited, believing the Western Sea would soon send back trophies and shouted stories. Instead, the first messages came broken, carried by boats that sat too low in the water near dawn. No one spoke defeat at first. Men used safer words like delay, confusion, wind, and orders misunderstood out there. Then the map room changed, because Actium no longer looked like a road, it looked like a narrowing throat. Agrippa's ships pressed the approaches, making supplies uncertain before the battle truly began far from home for them. Crews grew tired, tempers thinned, and great ships can feel heavy when confidence begins to loosen inside their crews. I had believed size meant safety, but the sea can punish weight when orders move faster than oars. Smoke covered more than water that day. It covered the difference between retreat, escape, and ruin for everyone. Some ships broke through, some turned, and some waited for commands that could not reach them through fear. We heard that the Queen's squadron moved away, and Antony followed. No one in Alexandria knew what that meant. At the docks, men argued until voices failed, because loyalty had no room for the word disaster yet. I remember touching a returned oar, cracked down the middle, and refusing to believe it belonged to us. A fleet like ours could not be broken by one afternoon, one coast, one rival, one change of wind. That was what I told myself while messengers avoided our eyes and officers folded maps too quickly nearby. Only later did I understand Actium had not merely damaged ships. It had damaged the belief holding them together. When the damaged boats reached Alexandria, victory had not ended, but certainty had begun to leave the harbor. The damaged ships did not return like losers. They returned like men carrying a truth too heavy to unload. At first, we refused it, because Alexandria had trained us to believe strength always came back with answers. Sailors spoke of broken lines, smoke, blocked water, and orders that vanished before the oars could obey them. They said Antony and Cleopatra had returned, but not as conquerors, and I could not accept the shape of that sentence. A fleet built from Egypt's wealth could suffer a storm, yes, but it could not simply lose Egypt's future. Then the map room grew quieter, and quiet men began moving markers back toward Alexandria instead of westward. That was when denial first became difficult, though none of us were ready to call it defeat aloud. The officers who once demanded speed now avoided unfinished hulls, as if new ships had become questions themselves. Palace lamps burned through the night, but their light no longer felt like command reaching the harbor below. Markets opened at dawn, bread still sold, gulls still cried, and yet every street seemed to listen west. Rome was not in sight, but Octavian had entered Alexandria through silence, letters, and men lowering their voices. For the first time, I wondered whether a city could remain standing while its choices were already leaving. Still, I wanted to believe Cleopatra had another plan hidden somewhere behind the palace walls and guarded doors. She had survived too much to be measured by one shoreline, one battle, or one terrible afternoon alone. So we kept working, not because orders made sense, but because loyalty needed something to do with its hands. Each hammer strike sounded smaller than before, but none of us dared let the rhythm die completely that night. When another damaged vessel arrived, even the proudest men stopped asking when the fleet would return home again. By then, Alexandria had not fallen, but the harbor had begun to understand what victory had not brought back. Only after the last rumor settled did Alexandria begin to understand that victory had not been delayed. It had changed owners. We still spoke Cleopatra's name with loyalty, because loyalty is slow to leave a city that raised you. Some said Antony's strength was broken, but I kept remembering the ships leaving like walls across the harbor. I wanted one more order, one more launch, one more proof that Egypt could answer Rome again tomorrow. But the orders grew smaller, and the palace lights seemed farther away from the hands that served them. The harbor still smelled of salt and pitch, yet every sound arrived with an emptiness I had never heard. Octavian had not burned Alexandria before my eyes. Rome entered through surrender, silence, and decisions made above us. That was harder to understand than fire, because the streets continued, the markets opened, and the sea remained beautiful. A kingdom can end while its stones still stand, and that was the lesson Alexandria gave me slowly. The last queen had not seemed small to us. She had seemed like the mind holding Egypt together. Now I saw that even brilliant minds can be trapped by time, rivals, debts, and broken alliances too. The ships did not fail because we built them carelessly. They failed because the world around them shifted. What we launched as power returned as evidence that Egypt could no longer choose its future alone freely. I walked once more beneath the unfinished hull, and its open ribs no longer promised victory to anyone. They looked like a question left in wood. How much can a kingdom carry before it breaks apart? Years later, I still believed Alexandria had been magnificent, and perhaps that made the loss heavier to remember. We had not built weak ships. We had built the last great answer of a world running out of choices. And when I remember that fleet, I do not see failure first. I see Egypt believing it could still endure.